Mystery worthy of a good crime writer. Many of you have probably read one of Debi Marshall's true crime books. She's crafted a stellar career investigating and writing about some of Australia's most notorious and baffling crimes. But Debi's biggest story hasn't been told. It's her own. It's the extraordinary story of her efforts to find the person who murdered the man she loved and bring that killer to justice. She had to be patient and very, very determined. Here's Mike Willesee.
They are cases of cold-blooded murders, colder than a Tasmanian winter. Two men living in different parts of Tasmania. Both men shot from behind, and the killer had every reason to believe he'd get away with it. But he had not counted on a brave and determined woman. She had lost her beloved partner in the first murder. And putting two and two together, she doggedly cracked the case.
I actually remember the day very clearly that we buried him. I was holding roses, as I have now. I just remember the preacher coming forward and inviting me to give them to him, which I did. So, to go through the grief of being with somebody who's been murdered, it leaves a terrible, terrible impact on people, a shocking impact. The killer can possibly walk away and try to hide, but for us, the people left behind, you can't. You really can't. You live with it one another every day of your life.
The murder of Ron Jarvis changed the course of Debi Marshall's life.
No, I loved him very much, and he loved me back.
The pain and loss she suffered made her determined to investigate other violent crimes.
I hope that all those who lived through those terrible days and years of fear will finally get what they deserve: justice.
Debi became a successful author, writing books about Australia's most notorious killers.
When people would often say to me, "You don't understand what it is like to have someone murdered. You could never understand." And I would say, "Yes, I do understand. I perfectly understand."
What she could not have known when Ron was murdered was how long she'd need to wait for justice. It would take 2 decades, another killing, the smallest of clues, and a bold undercover sting.
Come into our gang, life will be good, okay?
To begin to crack open the terrible crime that Debi was determined to solve. In 1990, Debi lived in Hobart. She was a divorced, single mum and a freelance journalist. The love of her life was Ron Jarvis. Tell me about Ron.
Well, he was a happy-go-lucky, easygoing, fairly easy on the eye sort of bloke. Hobart larrikin, and just, easy guy to fall in love with, which I did. He really loved me and vice versa, and he really adored my daughter.
I have very good memories of Ron. I remember him being really gentle, really loving, and yeah, just a really, really nice guy and someone that Mum was in love with.
Debi's daughter Louise was only a toddler at the time.
Well, my main memory of Ron is him coming back from a fishing trip and Mum meeting him at the door and saying, "Don't go and wake her up, don't, she's only been asleep a few hours." And he came in and he's going, "Louie, Louie, princess." And he came in and I jumped out of bed and gave him a massive hug.
Ron's day job was working on a crayfish boat. A year and a half into their relationship, Debi learned that he also had a side business, growing marijuana. Did you split over that?
We did. I went away and took my daughter with me and said to him, "That's it, I can't be with a man who's dealing dope, growing dope and dealing it." And I took off for a while, but our love was fairly strong and he told me that he'd burnt the crop.
Did you believe him?
Aren't we stupid when we're young and in love? I did.
Ron had not given up his drug-dealing past. Debi's suspicions were raised when she met an associate called Stephen Standage. Ron said Standage lived on Tasmania's east coast and owed him money.
I didn't trust him. He had wild hair, he was obese. He looked like not a very nice character, and I wondered why Ron was with him.
On Friday, July 31st, 1992, Ron told Debi he was going to a pub in Hobart to meet a man who owed him $10,000. Later that night, Ron was supposed to meet Debi's dad, but he didn't turn up. The next night, he was supposed to be at a party at Debi's place. He didn't arrive. It was out of character for Ron not to call. Debi was angry and worried.
I knew that I had to contact the guy who I knew to be Steve. So by Monday morning, I started looking for him. I couldn't remember his last name, so I rang every hotel on the east coast of Tasmania. Hello, could I speak to Steve, please? And of course, the reaction was to laugh. 5 o'clock on a, afternoon, 20 Steves in the bar. And I said, can you run me through the surnames? Steve Smith, Steve Brown. And this went on for about 3 hotels, and finally I hit pay dirt. And the barmaid laughed, took me through all the names, and she said Steve Standage, and I said, that's him.
Why Steve Standage?
I think he was more than surprised. He was horrified that I'd tracked him down.
I'm not going to talk to you about this here.
He was not happy with me at all for finding him.
Debi decided to confront Standage.
We had a conversation in the back bar, during which time he said, you need to back off, you're treading on dirty toes.
You need to back off.
And I said, are you threatening me with my life? And he said, you need to back off. Ron has been murdered by one of his very close friends.
Don't look at me. Look at his very close friends.
That was the first I knew that Ron was dead.
7 months after Ron vanished, a discovery was made near a village called Nugent, an hour's drive northeast of Hobart. 2 men out hunting found human remains covered by branches. Debi was asked to identify clothing found at the scene.
And I knew those sand shoes very well. He lived in them. And I said, yeah, they're his. And they said, I'm afraid to tell you, he's been murdered.
Ron Jarvis had been shot twice from behind, once in the head and once in the back. Debi suspected Stephen Standage, but there was no direct evidence to connect him to the crime.
I remember being a little bit distraught every now and then, asking when he was coming home, why he wasn't there, why he wasn't there for dinner. I just didn't understand, and Mum certainly sheltered me from that.
In the years that followed, Debi felt compelled to turn her hand to writing about other unsolved murders.
I used to be very worried for her, which I still am. I find it amazing how gutsy she is and how far she will go to actually get to the bottom of a story.
Many times during those years, Mike, watching my daughter grow up and thinking, will we ever get justice? And I feared often that Steve Standage had got away with murder.
My nana rang me, I think it was around about 6 o'clock, and said that Dad hadn't come home for tea at 5:30. Dad's a creature of habit. He'd be sitting at home for 5:30 waiting for his tea.
Tanya's dad, John Thorne, lived at Lake Leak, 160 kilometres from Hobart. He'd gone missing with no explanation, but his children had no reason to suspect foul play.
His car was missing, his chainsaw was missing. My initial thoughts were that he'd had some sort of accident.
John Thorne farmed trout and ran tourist cabins. His kids remember him as a larrikin.
He was a little bit cheeky, yeah. He used to like practical jokes and those sorts of things.
He was the guy out there that was for the underdog. He'd help anybody with anything, especially with someone who might have been less fortunate than himself.
Locals and family members joined the search for John. They feared he'd had an accident cutting wood.
It was August, cold. He wasn't going to survive very long in the bush if he'd cut himself. Whilst he had good bush sense and good bush smarts, no one was going to survive in those temperatures if they'd injured themselves.
As the days passed, with no sign of John, Adam began to fear the worst.
I was sitting in his lounge room and I don't believe in afterlife or anything like that, but I felt this presence behind me. It was there, it was real, and it was basically saying, you have to look harder, you will find me.
The next day, Adam found his dad's body in rugged bushland a few kilometres from home.
It's an image that's etched in my head and it'll be there forever. And no matter how hard I try, I can't get rid of it.
He'd been shot in the head from behind and covered with branches.
I wonder what happened to him. I wonder, did he lie out there suffering? I wonder, did he know that it was going to happen to him? I worry that he was frightened.
The murder also raised chilling questions for Debi Marshall, whose partner Ron Jarvis had been shot and murdered 14 years before.
And the first question I had was, it's up in Standage's neck of the woods. I wonder if he's got anything to do with this. Because I think what's important to understand here is that from the time they found Ron's body, I knew that Stephen Standage was responsible for his murder.
Stephen Standage not only lived in the area, he was John Thorne's neighbour. They'd even become good mates.
Whenever Dad spoke of him, it was always like, you know, Steve and I did this, saw Steve today, Steve come over, had a cup of tea, whatever it might be.
Stephen Standage and John Thorne also shared a common interest, growing marijuana, just like Debi's partner, Ron Jarvis.
There were similarities with both men. They were both shot in the back. They were both growing dope in the bush with Standage. They were both covered with saplings. And they were both supposed friends of Standage.
He owed Dad money. I don't know how much money he owed him. I do know the assumption is that he took Dad's wallet and there was a few $1,000s in Dad's wallet.
This time, the killer had left a clue to his identity, a piece of DNA on a nail at the crime scene. So Standage had slipped up.
Standage had slipped up big time.
While the DNA on the nail placed Standage at the scene, it didn't prove he was the killer. Police knew Standage was one of the last people to see John alive. Standage had also been one of the last people to see Ron Jarvis alive.
I think they were hampered by the fact that it was circumstantial. They didn't have, again, the smoking gun. It was incredibly frustrating for me because I think that they knew it was him and they just didn't have enough to let a charge stick at that point.
Drug dealer Stephen Standage was now the prime suspect in the cold-blooded murders of Ron Jarvis in 1992 and John Thorne in 2006. Both were shot from behind, their bodies left in remote bushland.
Well, we're dealing with a serial killer, really, who is so psychopathically cold and detached that his arrogance led him to believe that he could just dump the bodies where he did and walk away.
I mean, I don't know how a murderer thinks, but you'd imagine after 22 years you probably would have thought you were going to get away with it.
Police needed more evidence to crack the case. Melbourne's Crown Casino was chosen as the venue for an elaborate undercover sting operation targeting Standage.
He was a gambler. They lured him to Melbourne, put him up at Crown Casino, allowed him to wander around with their money, having a lovely time, and then started to lure him into their trap, as they did Daniel Morcan's killer. It was the same game they played there.
It's called the Mr. Big Sting. Victorian undercover police joined the operation, playing the role of well-connected gangsters who wanted to hire Standage but first needed to make sure any links to past crimes had been cleared up.
Come into our gang, life will be good, okay?
Standage was very, very clever. And so he made no admissions as such to them. They started talking about that, you know, there's a cloud around you with the Ron Jarvis murder and John Thorne murder, so you better tell us, mate, and we can let it all go away. But if we don't know about it, then we can't really help you.
The only thing they'd have on me is if I opened this fucking mouth. There's only two people that know what happened that night. One of them's dead.
He doesn't outright admit it because that's him and his personality. He's very guarded. But he says certain things that when you add them together, whilst it's not a direct admission, they look quite damning, yes.
They didn't find my DNA on a bullet inside his body or something. They found it on a nail in a fucking tree.
The recorded conversations gave police what they needed to charge Standage. He was put on trial for both murders.
I mean, obviously, I've got a lot of resentment and hatred towards him. I mean, he took someone from me who I love a lot. It'd only be human nature to hate him.
The trial lasted 5 months. The chief witness was Debi Marshall, who was there when the jury foreman handed down the verdict.
He virtually yelled out the word guilty. Have you reached your verdict? Yes. How do you find guilty or not guilty? Guilty! And I have no memory of this, but apparently I yelled out, yes! And was told by the judge to please quieten down, Miss Marshall. It's been awful, actually. I don't think people realise unless they have someone close to them murdered, just how it impacts on the rest of your life. You lack trust. In my case, I didn't have a partner for a very long time.
Standage was sentenced to 48 years in prison. Justice for those left behind.
At the end of the day, he stole my father. And that, whilst I'm grateful for the fact he's been sentenced, it doesn't bring my dad back.
For my brother, I've watched him change. He's lost his best friend. It's also my kids will never get to know my dad, and he'll never take them fly fishing or teach them bush skills, and he'll never get the happiness that he could have done from them.
For Debi Marshall, there's comfort that the man who murdered her partner will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Debi, how has this changed your life?
Oh, it's changed it enormously. At the time I was a qualified teacher and was also a qualified journalist, but I wasn't an investigative crime journalist. And looking for Ron set me off on that path because I knew that that's what I had to do, to go on and hold the hand of other people who go through exactly the same thing, and to seek justice and to right miscarriages of justice if I can as well.